Welcome to TechRadar Talks. I'm Henry St. Ledger.
And I'm Vic Hood, TechRadar's gaming writer. And it's been a busy week in terms of The Last of Us news. So we thought that we'd jump on a call and have a bit of a chat about it all. So just a heads up, we won't be talking about any of the spoilers specifically to do with The Last of Us, and we won't be showing any footage from it. So this is a spoiler-free video. So you can watch it without worrying about any of that. So just before we touch on that, Henry, let's talk about the past few game delays that we've been hearing about. Over the past year, there's been quite a lot going on.
Yeah, well, I think what's quite interesting about the situation, we've seen so many delays just in the past week or so, but it was already feeling like delay season. We had Cyberpunk being delayed until September. The Last of Us delayed off the back of, I think, an initial 2 delays before the latest indefinite one, as well as a few others.
Yeah, it seems to be. So before kind of COVID hit, we were looking at quite a few delays, and that seemed to be as a result of a lot of developers releasing games that weren't quite finished, and then the backlash from fans being that you're then trying to put out the fire because the game's released, and then you're trying to patch it, and by that point the ship is usually already sailed. So like you said, we had Cyberpunk delayed, and we had Marvel's Avengers delayed, and The Last of Us had been delayed from February 21st through to May 29th. And then when COVID hit, it looked like Final Fantasy would be. I think it was very much teetering on the edge, but it came out, even if there was some shipping delays, and now The Last of Us was indefinitely delayed alongside Iron Man VR. And while Iron Man VR still hasn't got a firm release date, it looks like The Last of Us has been given a release date now due to these spoilers coming out, and it feels like that's forced Sony and Naughty Dog's hands a little bit.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a, I don't want to call it necessarily knee-jerk reaction. I don't think they would have put down that date unless they thought they were going to ship it. But it definitely feels like a bit of an attempt to gear the conversation around the game towards its release date rather than the spoilers.
Do you think that those delays, the Iron Man one and the Last of Us one, then Death Stranding on PC's been delayed and Fortnite Season 3 has been delayed, do you think that's all down to COVID, or do you think there's other things at play that have caused these delays?
Yeah, it's a good question. And at this point, it can be a bit hard to differentiate what's what. Every developer has a potential COVID reason essentially to delay their game. I think it's often more of a financial issue, possibly, rather than the development of the game, with so many retail stores being shut. The Fortnite delay, I can't imagine it being much to do with that, given it's such an online game. I don't think it's a game that requires GameStop to be open for Season 3 to be a success. But there's I can imagine The Last of Us probably having quite a big figure for in-store retail that they're possibly worried about losing. I don't necessarily blame Sony and Naughty Dog for wanting to assess this very odd situation we find ourselves in, though I am very happy to see a firm release date.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mixture. There's 2 kind of key factors in these delays. And the first one is that these development teams are now having to work from home. And I think we underestimate kind of the power of working in the same environment. And these, like, people working on the likes of The Last of Us and Fortnite, they're working with like big assets, they're working with big games. Because we've seen kind of smaller independent games coming out kind of no problem, but those bigger ones, it feels like that slowed down the development process. I know that there's been rumors that for Cyberpunk, that while it's still on track to release in September now, there's talk of some of the voice acting hasn't been completed, and that's going to have to be patched in afterwards. So it's that, and I think it's like you said, there's like physical copies for some things are a big deal, and it seemed while Naughty Dog claimed that it was logistical concerns was why The Last of Us was delayed indefinitely. I think a big part of that is shipping, and it is that physical base. Like Neil Druckmann said that he wanted the players to be playing at the same time, and I guess so that something like these spoilers didn't happen, I guess, so that you didn't get some people playing and then posting about it and other people getting FOMO that they haven't got their hands on it yet. So yeah, I think while those shipping concerns still are happening, we could still be seeing delays. And while Cyberpunk is still on track to release in time, this still could last for a few more months, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see more delays appearing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very hard to gauge what is and what isn't going to be delayed. I think everyone, developer, player, and publisher and distributor alike, are very keenly watching how the situation develops. But to get onto the spoilers themselves, because we had a bit of an uneasy reaction when we saw what was being leaked.
Yeah, well, luckily we managed to kind of avoid that, and it's been difficult, I think, for a lot of people to avoid those spoilers, but it has brought up that whole like ethical issue of, are spoilers okay? Is it okay for the rumor is that the video was released by a Naughty Dog employee who's disgruntled over a pay dispute. And I've seen a lot of talk on Twitter and things about, is it okay for someone to use that as like their means of taking down a company? Because we know that Naughty Dog's had some issues regarding crunch and allegations of like sexual harassment and things. And if that's their way of kind of gaining back control and being like sticking it to them, as it were, what do you think about that? Do you think that that's okay for someone to do, or is it a case of one person shouldn't bring down the whole ship?
Yeah, I definitely lean on the latter. And obviously we don't know the extent of internal issues or how exactly this leak did come about. But leaking the story feels like something it's not just bad for the developer, it's bad for a lot of players who just wanted to be able to go in blind without worrying about having the story spoiled. I mean, so many films have been put off watching because someone spoiled the plot to me. And I'm trying very hard to avoid these spoilers. But I think something that impacts players so much is something I can't support regardless of the internal situation of the developer.
Yeah, and it is something that's difficult as journalists to maneuver around, because I've seen we chose as a site not to look at the spoilers, to report on the spoilers, and that's something that we have chosen to do because of that reason, that we felt like we don't want to spoil it for other people. It's not fair to the development team, it's not fair to players, and just to read or share that information would just be giving it extra fuel, right? But it is something that other publications have covered, and from a journalistic standpoint, is that of use to the public? Is it of public interest? And I was going to say, do you think that spoilers are public interest?
It's tricky. Like, I mean, they're definitely interesting. I'm sure people are reading the articles. But when it becomes an issue of how to control the spread of that information, like we've heard about, people just posting the plot on Twitter or talking about it on Twitch streams. I don't begrudge anyone wanting to learn information for themselves. If you want to know the plot, like, the spoilers are out there, read them. But there are so many people who don't want to see them, and it's, while our communication platforms are very good at spreading information, they're not that good at stopping information. That's something, again, that leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, I think the difference is, as a site, we do report on a lot of leaks, and sometimes it's hard to differentiate like what is okay and what isn't. I think in terms of like speculation, rumors, we'll report on stuff like that because there's hype, right? And there's hype, and people kind of know tidbits, and that's part of kind of any excitement for something coming out, is picking, oh, will this be true? Will that not be true? But we never spoil the whole story. Our aim is never to take away that experience from the player. It's to inform on little tidbits of information that would come out in something like a trailer, but doesn't take away from someone actually sitting down and enjoying that game. And do you think that this will have taken that experience away from a lot of players who have accidentally stumbled on the leaks and didn't want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're very right in differentiating between the leak that happened and rumors, because even if a rumor is true, it doesn't spoil anything if you don't know it's true.
Yeah.
It's a far lesser evil. And I think that the kind of person who would be devastated by reading the spoilers by accident I imagine, is still going to play and enjoy the game. And obviously the game, I imagine and hope, will be worth experiencing for the player, even if maybe one or 2 points from the plot are spoiled. But I think it does take away an element of awe you might have while playing the game. That's something I really look for in a game, is when I'm surprised and taken aback and taken through things I didn't expect. So I don't know if it's going to impact sales particularly, but I don't think it's good for players either.
Yeah, I think that as far as we know, it's how detailed these leaks are. Apparently it goes through all the levels, the story, there was cutscenes, and I find it hard kind of to know why people would want to know that. And maybe it is a case of, if we're playing devil's advocate, maybe it's a case of you want to know what you're getting before you buy it, maybe. And you want to know if you're about to shell out money on The Last of Us 2. It's difficult times for everyone right now in terms of money, and you want to know if you're going to pay for something that you're actually going to enjoy. But you take that risk with any game you buy, essentially. So I personally, I'm still going to get it. And I know a lot of people that it hasn't impacted. But I don't know, maybe if I had seen those spoilers, maybe that opinion would have changed. Maybe I would have been swayed one way or another a bit more. But it's like you said, it's a roller coaster, and a game's you're meant to like ride that emotion wave, especially with a game like The Last of Us. But in terms of people wanting to actually avoid the spoilers, because it's still going, we've seen the likes of this Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the reveal for that, people are jumping on that stream and they're throwing out spoilers everywhere, and it's quite difficult apart from avoiding the internet. So what do you think is the best option for people if they don't want to avoid social media, they don't want to avoid the internet, to try and make sure that they're not picking up any unwanted spoilers?
Yeah, well, I think you've already touched on one of the main things, which is muting words. Both Twitter and Facebook both have some level of mechanics to facilitate that, to try and stop you receiving spoilers. That said, a lot of social media users are quite savvy about that. You see a lot of people putting asterisks into words so that their tweets will get through the algorithm without being snapped up before people can see it. Yeah, attempting to limit your use, I suppose. Maybe go back and play The Last of Us 1 instead of going on Twitter. Maybe that's a better use of your time until June 19th. But, that's not necessarily a realistic solution. So, try and shield your eyes the moment you see anything vaguely Naughty Dog related.
Yeah, I guess it is hard with that, because you can mute like all of the words and things, but I guess it's places like streams where it's quite hard it pops up so instantly, and it's places you're not expecting it to happen. So I guess it is just trying to hide those chats, trying to just not read anything that looks like it might be. But a lot of people are posting the videos and things. I guess it's going to be a couple of months of like maneuvering around this. And for whatever reason, people who are sharing the leaks really want to spoil it, I guess, for other people, and I don't get it. I get why, in a sense, for the enjoyment, but also I guess in a personal level I don't understand. But the issue also is, we should kind of clarify that you can read these leaks and that's okay, but if you do share them, if you share the videos and stuff like that, you do leave yourself potentially open to legal action, because you're sharing information that is Naughty Dog's, it's confidential information. So just on that aspect alone, probably don't.
Yeah.
Never mind any other issues. So we've kind of talked a bit about the fact that previously games or whatever have been spoiled. Has there ever been a TV show or film or game that has been spoiled for you and you felt like it took that first-time experience away from you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so much content to consume these days anyway. I'm the kind of person who reads a lot of plot summaries so I can get away without watching a movie or a video game if I don't think I'm going to have time for it. But when that happens against your will, it's quite frustrating. I had this with the first Bioshock game, where the ending was spoiled for me because of an article I read online that I don't think was marked for spoilers, or if it was, I'd rushed through it.
Yeah.
And I started playing the game, but after a couple of hours in, I just felt like all of the excitement of propelling myself forward was taken away because I knew exactly where it was headed. And I didn't, sinking 20, 30 hours into a game when I know what I'm getting just didn't seem worth it.
Yeah, I've had a similar thing with Game of Thrones where it was as it was happening, everything was spoiled and I wasn't watching it. But before I even got into it, I knew what the Red Wedding was. I knew all of the those really key episodes that people had talked about. And it started to feel the pressure was on that I had to be watching it at the same time or else it was going to be spoiled. And I think kind of when it comes to something is already and it's happening currently and you can keep up with it, and if you don't keep up with it then that's your loss, you're open to spoilers. But if it's something that nobody has access to beforehand, then it doesn't seem so fair. So as a result of this, we've seen the game has a new release date of June 19th. Do you think it's going to hit the release date?
I wish I knew. My gut says yes. I think that Naughty Dog and Sony may have been strong-armed into putting down a release date. I wouldn't be surprised if they had that in mind anyway, and maybe just hadn't announced it yet. But I don't think, given it's had 2 delays, an indefinite delay, and now been brought back from that, I don't think they would give us a date they weren't confident on.
Yeah. So do you think, given we're not quite sure where COVID is at the minute, in terms of we don't know when this will kind of blow over, do you think people who have ordered physical copies, do you think that will be an issue in terms of people getting stuff on time, or is that something Naughty Dog will probably curb in advance?
It's tricky. I mean, obviously they have about 6 weeks to look into that. Delays seem very possible. Even just my experience getting things delivered to my home, I've expected, I've had weird delays for some things, and some things have come weirdly immediately. Sony probably can't predict the extent of every individual game delay, but yeah, I do expect people with physical retail copies to possibly get a few days after they hope for. Although possibly if you send out the retail possibly earlier than you would have, you then get an issue of what if people in retail are getting it before everyone who gets it digitally.
Yeah.
And
it's a similar issue. Final Fantasy VII had that kind of issue, and they just had to ask people to not spoil it. I guess with the horse is bolted now, that's kind of that's gone. We're not gonna. That the worst has kind of happened, I hope. But we've also seen the Ghost of Tsushima's also been delayed. So that came off the back of, they were kind of like, here's a Last of Us release date, but also we're putting Ghost of Tsushima. We're delaying that. So
they hide the bad news.
Yeah, it's like one hand gives, one takes away. But it's only a couple of weeks that we're waiting for that. What do you think? We haven't seen a whole bunch about Ghost of Tsushima. It's still kind of a bit up in the air on what that game's about, and a July release date seems still a bit, I don't know, maybe optimistic. Either that, or they're just not marketing the game as well as they probably could because The Last of Us is so close. Do you think that'll still release in time? Do you think it'll actually do well because it's so close in behind this big hitter?
Yeah, I feel like the closeness of Ghost of Tsushima's release date to Last of Us 2 isn't going to help it. And I think you're right in that we've seen a lot less marketing for it, which isn't to say that we won't see it ramp up in the next couple of weeks, which might be when that marketing really matters. But I think if you've hunkered down with The Last of Us 2, I don't know if you'll be looking to immediately splash out another 50 quid or dollars on another Sony AAA game.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's kind of a dark horse a little bit. But I don't know if the July release date is going to be all that feasible. The pressure's on for The Last of Us. So that's kind of something they need to push. But Ghost of Tsushima, I'm not so sure. There's a few other games releasing the next while. Nothing particularly as big as The Last of Us, but it feels like everything is open to being delays. We're just kind of waiting to hear when the next delay is going to be.
Yeah.
So we've got the first Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion is due in June. Death Stranding's already been pushed back. Then there's a couple of games for kind of Switch coming out. It feels like it's going to be a quiet few months potentially in terms of games, and hopefully The Last of Us is long enough to keep us.
It's a bit of a shame as well for developers, because this is the time when people might be looking to play a lot more games than they do usually, and the games they were going to be playing can't be got to them as quickly as they're hoped. Yeah,
it just feels like the calm before the storm, because we still know that PS5, Xbox Series X releasing at the end of the year, and there's always the possibility that any game delays, they'll pull that up until those consoles launch, and maybe that would be a better strategy for them, because we do know that any of the big games that are going to release in the next year are likely going to be cross-gen. They're going to release on like the current consoles, are going to release on the next ones. So just to wrap up, Henry, what do you want to see from The Last of Us 2? You're a big Last of Us fan, and that game, it feels like it might not be able to be topped. It still is one of the best PlayStation games out there. What do you think that Part 2 is going to need to do to them better?
It's a really tough question. What I loved so much about the first game is how the mechanics were often quite secondary to the story. I felt like the characters and the narrative were the most important thing there. It obviously had some real gut punches in it. And I feel like the difficulty for the game sequel isn't necessarily getting bigger and better, though it may well be that. It's more like getting another season of your favorite Netflix show, and you need the story to maintain and be as good as the previous one, and you need to care about it as much, which I think is often quite a different proposition than possibly, getting the next Just Cause game. Will the explosions be bigger? I definitely feel like the motion capture is probably going to be quite a lot more advanced than what we saw in the last game. It may be more emotionally affecting because of that. I'm looking forward to being surprised with what they do. I very much enjoyed the enemy AI, the clickers. Seeing more variety in that, to more erratic AI behavior could be very interesting for the game. So I think there are quite a few things they can do, but I don't necessarily need them to do anything different for me to be satisfied.
From kind of what we've seen, it looks like it's going to be a bit more violent and it's going to be a bit more mature than what we've seen. Do you think that's kind of a natural progression from the first game, or is it something that could maybe kind of taint the series a bit? Because while there was, a mature theme to it and it was emotional, it didn't feel like it was gratuitous in its violence or in any of that stuff. Do you think it's something that could affect that story and take away the emotion a little bit?
Possibly. It's difficult. The darker, grittier tone definitely feels like a choice. I don't know if it was a necessary choice, but I think I probably trust the studio to have made the right one on that. It's difficult, and it's also very hard to judge based on possibly the marketing or the little clips of gameplay we've seen. Maybe they're not representative of the whole, and I imagine there's still going to be elements that justify or lift up the story. I mean, the moment they started showing Dina in the first teaser trailers way back when. I was terrified they were going to give Ellie a girlfriend to remove her in quite a horrific way. And I haven't seen the spoilers, and I'm worried about reading that there.
Yeah, because there's been that worry that the classic trope of bury your gays, which has always been an issue of that in games or media of any sort, that you have an LGBT couple and that something horrible will always happen to them. And it'll essentially become a revenge story. And the rumors that we've seen before this spoiler did hint at potentially it was, payback on a homophobic cult or something along those lines. But yeah, it's the same as you, as I'm hoping that it's not that case, kind of. But I don't see anything horribly wrong with taking down a homophobic cult, to be honest. Yeah. As long as there's some sort of happy ending in there. We can't have all dark, especially right now. And maybe it is that the decision was to push at a certain point because nobody wants to play a post-apocalyptic game in a time that feels like the end of the world. Yeah. So, just final question, Henry. PS5, The Last of Us, it's more than likely going to happen. When do you think it'll happen? Do you think it's going to be launched? Do you think they're going to wait a little bit, especially with these delays? What are you predicting?
Yeah, I think especially with the delays, I feel like work on the PS5 master, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, probably won't be able to start in earnest until the game is shipped. I feel like the last remaster took a couple of years for the first game to get over to PS4. I feel like 2021 is very possible.
Well, we could see a similar thing to what happened with the PS4, where The Last of Us released on PlayStation 3. Then we saw the remaster version for PlayStation 4, and something similar could potentially happen here. It looks good as it is, so God knows how it'll look with that next-gen engine fully utilized. But I can't wait to kind of see. Thank you for talking to me, Henry. It's been lovely to chat about The Last of Us without worrying someone's going to pop in and spoil it all for us.
Yeah, thank God.
So thank you for watching TechRadar Talks. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any more of our Last of Us content, and especially our review, which is only a couple of months away. So that's goodbye from me.
And remember to head over to techradar.com for the latest gaming news and tech reviews.